Hey there, y'all. Should they blow it up or should they stay the course? That's the question we're going to look into today on True North Sports Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Barclay, and we're going to dive into a look at the Toronto Blue Jays. And this is something that's been stewing not only amongst myself, but amongst other fans for at least a couple of years now. And it's an issue that the longer we go with the two individuals we're going to discuss today, the worse it's going to get, really. Now, we're going to talk about Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins. And they came to the Blue Jays at the end of 2015 when, shockingly at the time, Paul Beeston and Alex Anthopoulos stepped away from the team, or more accurately were pushed out of the team into retirement, at least on Beeston's side, and then Alex moved on to at least two other opportunities, one of which he won a World Series. And so after the 2015 season, Alex had built something that remained special for at least a few more years. Sadly, the tinkering of the new regime, in a way, it really didn't work out. And so we're seeing the results of that now. So it takes a long time to build up a front office. It takes a long time to tear down a front office. And the problem with that is so much of today's sports landscape is we want it now. And we don't really have the patience to go through something that is necessary. Now, it's taken a while for Shapiro and Atkins to get people in place that are their people and to start drafting from their people. And then develop those players and get them up to the big leagues if it's at all possible, or use them as trade assets, all that kind of stuff. And we are, over the last few years, seeing the result of the Shapiro-Atkins people that are in place in scouting and player development. They've installed at least two coaches of their own choosing, and neither one of them really has turned out all that well. We had hope at one point for John Schneider. Sadly, I think there's too much interference from above him. Now, if we're looking at a team record standpoint from these two, they have a 667 and 671 record, which is not even a 500 record. They have 3 playoff appearances, 2016, 2020, and 2022. Unfortunately, that 2016 one needs to have a star beside it, because that was still Alex's team. That really wasn't their team. All the scouting, the player development, and many, like probably 8 out of 9 players on that roster were Alex's guys. So we haven't won a postseason series since we had a team that Alex built. And that's not good enough in 9 years. And the expectations around this team haven't even come close to getting met each time this team starts a season. And we've heard this excuse and that excuse and the other thing, and they've been doing stadium repairs. Now, sadly, they went through the COVID pandemic, and that was difficult. That was sort of at least one lost season. That's difficult for anybody, but there were teams that weathered that really well under the right leadership. So looking at it here, last season was supposed to be like their next postseason deep run. And we had Alek Manoah starting opening day. There was a lot of excitement around that because he was looking like the next coming of Doc Holliday. He was injured right from the start, and it took a long time to figure out what was going on there. And they had some other pitching issues. And one of the biggest questions about this team the last few years has always been the bullpen. They didn't have those shut down 100-mile-an-hour guys coming out of the bullpen the way the other top teams did. They would just pick the scrap heap, as it were, at the end of the winter and just hodgepodge something together. And they occasionally got some good years out of some guys like Adam Cimber and Trevor Richards. They had some good years out of those guys, but it wasn't sustainable. And they weren't drafting guys that were able to make an impact on the team. And the ones that could have and should still be here to make an impact, they were traded away for assets that aren't really assets at this point. Their signing record has been questionable at times. Sadly, we're getting to a point where some of those signings are running out of shelf life and there's no plan to replace it. So when you're coming into 2024 and you're expecting a breakout season where there's going to be a deep playoff run, you have a $234 million payroll, and you bring in a dud of a 74-88 season, good enough for last in the beast in the East, the Eastern Conference, or the East Division. That just doesn't cut it. And that's kind of to the point where it's like, we can't do this anymore. We need change. And Edward Rogers, if this makes it to you, it's time for a change, buddy. You got to get yourself in a room, do some research that any one of us fans has already done, and know that what you're doing ain't working. And don't be a microcosm of Canada itself and live out the definition of insanity. You can't keep running these two out and expect different results. It just doesn't work that way. You need to make a change, and you need to start at the top this time. The players, even a lot of the coaching staff, aren't necessarily the issue, even though they're a result of the issue. Change needs to happen, but it has to start from the top down. And as fans of the only team in Canada, you are responsible to a degree to make sure that you do the very best you can for us. And yes, there's something to be said for continuity, but when continuity is underachieving and bringing you losing records every year and putting you in last place in the East every year, that's just not good enough in this country. We expect teams to contend. We expect teams to win, because that's what we expect in Canada. We expect you, as the owner, Edward Rogers, to do everything you can to put a winning team on the field. And you need to have the people in place in order that a winning team is produced. So despite having a top 10 payroll, because they have one of the, I would say even top 5 payrolls in all of Major League Baseball at pushing 240, $250 million. We've been averaging 74 wins a season since 2016. And I remember years ago watching or listening to a radio show that I really respect, and I will mention the name of the show only, not the host, but Primetime Sports. And the host and a guest were talking about the Blue Jays, and their math, and it works out, was that you need 92 wins minimum in the East. Now, some of the other divisions you can get by on 85, 86, something like that, because they're weaker divisions. But we're not in those divisions. We need 92 wins a year minimum. And we need the teams to do that. And we need the people in place that can draft, develop players, and bring us into that 92 win window. And I would suggest between, say, 92 and 105 should be the benchmark of this team every single year. And so we haven't been past the wild card round since the team that was essentially constructed by Alex Anthopoulos. And I don't know about you, but other than being a weather reporter, no other job in the world you can get paid for being wrong that amount of times. And failing that amount of times. Your job just doesn't last in any other, even in any other sport, much less, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense how these two guys are still in control of this team. Now, 2024 exposed a lot of weaknesses on this team. We've already mentioned the bullpen. Their bullpen was horrible last year. It was 6 innings, 7 innings from your starter. And Bowden Francis must have had a really frustrating winter because he could get you into the 8th inning with a no-hitter and then lose. Because the bullpen was that bad last year. And quite frankly, it hasn't been much better this year. Yes, we had the return of Jimmy Garcia. We have a decent back end with him, Chad Green, and Jeff Hoffman. That's been decent. The problem this year has been getting to that back end. The middle relievers, the long relievers, they're a bunch of guys that when you read that list, you go, who? I don't recognize those names. What have they done? And that's just not good enough to get you to 92 wins. It just doesn't happen that way. And so then you had an offense that all of a sudden couldn't hit home runs. You had an offense that just was stagnant, stale, felt dead all year. And you had your best player that, until the All-Star break, was tradable. Sure, he went on to win a Silver Slugger and had a 300 average and a decent year, but imagine what he could have done if he did that all year. He could have won a batting title if he'd have been like that all year. So the thing about it is, you had a Bo Bichette last year who previously had been leading the league in hits, was on base all the time, could steal bases, and was solid on defense, even though he struggled early in his career with errors. He was way better the last few years, but then last year he just couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, was injured all the time, and there was no one else around them to help. Springer had an abysmal year. Like, we love Springs. He's a great guy. At the beginning of his contract, he was a great signing. And then last year, he just fell off the map. Now, he's been better this year, and we are thankful for that. We're getting a better year out of Springer. It's just, when you look at Shapiro and Atkins, and the best they can do is call it a significant setback. And talking about improving over the winter and we're going to fill the needs. And instead of concentrating on the needs the last 2 winters, what did they do? They went after the whale sharks, the great blue whales. They went after Ohtani, they went after Soto, which was a gigantic blunder from this front office. Because if you had $700 million to give Ohtani and $750 million to give Juan Soto, if you break that up into 3 parts, you have $300 million a piece to get a next tier guy from those 2 players. You could get 3 of them each year. That's 6 top tier free agents that you could have went after instead of going after those gigantic fish. Why? It makes no sense. Because those guys are just one guy. You have a 40-man roster, and you need all 40 of those guys to be serviceable big leaguers. Not 4A players, as Zani used to call them. You don't want them to be AAA guys that you're using because you got no one else. And you don't want them to be 37, 38-year-old has-beens that you're picking up off the scrap heap and giving one more chance to. You can't operate that way with this team. Now, if you're Oakland, maybe. If you're even the team you guys came from, Cleveland, maybe. Minnesota, maybe. But this Toronto Blue Jays team, no. This team is the team of Canada. There's no team down the road in Ottawa, out in Winnipeg, out in Alberta, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver. There's no teams out there. Montreal, how we used to have. There's no teams there. This is the team. So picking up guys off the scrap heap like that because you waited too long and there's nothing left, that's not acceptable as a fan of the Toronto Blue Jays. So, next part, what shall we get into here? Their draft results have been abysmal. Now, their first draft in 2016 was solid. It had the likes of Bo Bichette. There was potential in Nate Pearson. You had Cavan Biggio, Alek Manoah, and an international signing that year was actually Gabriel Moreno. So that first draft was a decent draft because you had your big 3. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was an Alex Anthopoulos signing, and then Bo Bichette and Cavan Biggio were your big 3 that rocketed up through the system and were the next wave, the next core that you were going to have to follow that 2016 team. And you sold that for a couple of years. And people could buy that because these guys looked legit big leaguers. And from then until now, there has been 0 pitching prospects coming up through the system that are can't miss. Guys going back to the days of Marcus Stroman and Aaron Sanchez and oh shoot, I always forget Thor's name because we traded him too early, really. But that was an Alex Anthopoulos thing. But we've had no pitching prospects like that. I mean, they tried to hype up Nate Pearson. Alek Manoah that first year looked like he was going to be good. But there's been 0 pitching in the system. And they haven't been bringing in anybody to fill those roles that have made any sort of impact whatsoever. They've had to trade to get big league pitching. The only real free agent I think they signed was Gausman and maybe Bassett. Everyone else has been traded for. And at this point in time, they're picking up the pieces because they signed Max Scherzer. And while he's a great pitcher when healthy, he's dealing with something very serious in his hand right now and has been for a couple of years. So that was sort of exciting to say, hey, we've got this guy. Hopefully he'll be healthy, but he just hasn't been. And so now again, I saw this morning, 2 pitchers got signed. You look at the history of those pitchers, and one's kind of past his prime, and the other one, it's like, who? Like, what is this guy? And quite frankly, it's, again, they're just looking at the scrap heap. Guys designated for assignment, guys who haven't been signed because no other team is like, yeah, we'll take him, he's good. And we're just picking up scraps again, trying to piece together a 5th starting spot in the rotation that if they had to use their money more wisely in the offseason instead of going after Soto, we could have had a frontline starter that was a free agent instead of letting them go somewhere else. Even if you had to pay a little bit extra for them, you still needed a 5th guy because you know Manoah's not coming back till August at least. And you don't know what you're getting from him when he does come back. And you had a wonky Max Scherzer. So, where's the drafting? Where are the guys coming up through the system? Even your position players. You have a guy in, I think it's Vancouver right now, Nimmo, or something like that, and it's like, this kid's like 20 years old, not even, but he's not ready. So who's coming other than him? And he's at single A, so you don't even know what he's gonna be at triple A or at the big league level. So that's the thing, is their drafting and development, they just don't have the guys for it. You heard of them cleaning house on Alex's guys, and you're just like, why? Why are we doing this? This makes no sense to me. And it seems to me like Rogers really dropped the ball on this because they had Ben Cherington in the organization, who has been a really credible, solid GM that built up the Boston Red Sox from nothing, along with Theo, and you had a chance to make him your GM, and they didn't take it. It makes no sense to me. So here's the thing, is that there has been almost zero drafting and development in this team since Alex Anthopoulos departed after 2015. And so that's been a big black eye on Shapiro and Atkins. This next part that we're going to talk about is very hard to talk about, because anyone that has been in the organization or the system coming up has been either traded away, calling them bad for the clubhouse, or they're just too loosey-goosey, that kind of thing, even though, turns out, they were the engine driving the team. They were the good morale boosters that the team needed to continue growing. And Shapiro and Atkins were like, oh, we need a culture change. Well, start with yourselves, guys. Step aside. Let someone who knows what to do come in and do it. Because their trade history, besides Jose Barrios, has been abysmal. You look at the shining example Gabriel Moreno and Lourdes Gurriel Jr. for Dalton Varsho. And if that doesn't bring a thud to the conversation right out of the gate, I don't know what does. Because you have let go of Danny Jansen, who was like furniture with the Blue Jays. He'd been there so long. The pitchers all love throwing to him. He, other than some injuries, was like a rock behind the plate. He was the best games pitchers threw were to him. Point in case Yusei Kikuchi. And you let him walk. And or you trade him away for nothing, basically. Who did you have coming as a catcher? A guy who can't run? Who's a liability on the base path? Even if he does get there, even if he did win a Silver Slugger one year? But he's a liability when he gets on base. It's station to station if he's at the lead of the thing. Like you're running. And that just makes no sense. They say, oh, he's good behind the plate. Well, yeah, he's got a bit of a rocket for an arm, and he's, throwing out a good amount of base runners this year, but he catches from his knee. And if he can't run, how's he got the flexibility and the moving from his knee when you have guys in way better shape than him that can't do it? You have Tyler Heineman, who blew your season last year catching from his knee. And who could your catching tandem be? Danny Jansen and Gabriel Moreno. I'll take that any day of the week and twice on Sunday over Alejandro Kirk and Tyler Heineman. So that's just the beginning of their abysmal trade record. Oh, and guess what? The year they traded those two guys, they were in the World Series. Let that sink in for a second. The year they were traded, their team ended up in the World Series. Yeah, they kind of wild-carded it in backdoor, but who cares? They were there. They went on a run. And those two guys were important to that run. And we have Dalton Varsho. Yes, he's one of the best outfielders in the game, and if you watch his highlight reel from the other night where he did a somersault and still caught the damn ball, you kind of go, holy jumping. But overall, he's barely hit his body weight if he's even done that. He's a great bunter. I wish he'd teach the rest of the team how to do that, because they need more of it, especially the small ball that they're forced to play right now, because the only guy hitting home runs really, or that can regularly, is Vladimir Guerrero. And so everyone else on the team needs to learn how to bunt, move runners over, get to the next base, keep the line moving. Situational hitting, stealing bases. Like, even in certain situations, you got a guy on third or bases loaded and nobody out. If you're getting out as a batter, it better be a ball to the warning track. Or in a weird kind of place where the guy from third can get home, because and this was a huge problem last year. Bases loaded, nobody out, 0 runs scored. How is that possible? That should be impossible. And trading away your heartbeat, Teo Hernandez, in 2022. Oh yeah, guess what? He won a World Series last year. Yeah, he had the Dodgers and all that fun stuff, but still, for a guy who's had an abysmal run in a Blue Jays uniform because he's been ever injured, Eric Swanson. Oh dear. Like, it is just terrifying what they get back in return in trades. They get fleeced every single time. The Jays sold off Kikuchi, Jansen, Garcia, Richards, And the 14 prospects they got in return are nobodies. No one who's coming to the major leagues. No one who's going to make an impact. Nobody who's going to make this team any better. And it's scary. So to look at all of this, we've presented a problem. Now, one of the things that I'm not big on is people who do podcasts, videos, all those kind of things, and they just present you a problem and leave the solution hanging in the wind. And you're looking at it going, okay, well, you want them to blow it up. So what's the next step if they do? And so I did some digging around, some looking into some things, and who might be a viable replacement for Mark Shapiro and or Ross Atkins. And there are more candidates out there, and say you replace Mark, and then whoever you bring in is going to replace Ross Atkins. The list changes at that point. Or if you, I don't know why you would, but if you kept Shapiro and forced him to replace Atkins, again, like, you'll bring in a guy, it could be one of these, and let's see what they can do. But you need proven people who can bring in their people that can do a better job of drafting, of trading, of recognizing and presenting talent to your team for acquisition. And this team really needs to stop swinging for the Sotos and the Otanis. And you say, oh, but it's a good look for the fan base. They get all excited, blah, blah, blah. Well, no. When I saw us going after Soto this year, that was not reason for excitement. Because I look at it like I just mentioned. You could break that money up into 3, get 3 guys who are just as good, if not better, onto our team with that same amount of money. So why are we chasing after someone we know wasn't coming here to begin with when we could be making our team better? So, what are the options for replacement? And these people, if we were to bring them in, have to do better than the basic nothing we have for the last 9-10 years of Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins. Now, if you have a $240 million payroll and you have Bo Bichette coming up as a free agent, it would be wise to try and sign him. Now, I hope this gets to Bo. Bo, Jays fans love you. Please have the humility to recognize that for you, for the next, say, 10 years, 250 is okay. That's a lot of money. Even after you pay all your taxes and all that stuff. You're still over $100 million. That's a lot of money. So, don't go for the Vladdy contract. It ain't happening. But we want you here, Bo. We can pay you well over the next 10 years. But then whoever's coming in has to surround them with talent that's perpetually coming up through the system, that makes a big league impact, the way it did when Alex was here. And we just need a stronger bullpen. We need stronger players in the system. And we need guys that, I don't care if you want a Gold Glove. I need you to be able to hit 270 to 300 every single year. And if you're not doing that, the Gold Glove don't mean a whole lot because even if you're saving runs, you're not scoring enough to win. And that's been the problem with Varsho, Jimenez, some of these other players that they have brought in. Third base has been a debacle since Josh Donaldson left. Like, you're piecing it together with Ernie Clement and Addison Barger. Now, that's a bit of a okay maybe thing, because if you say give Barger 100 games at third base, he might turn into something. But John's got to be willing to let him do it, and if he's not the guy for the job. Or maybe you could go find an next Josh Donaldson. Now, Matt Chapman was great until he had to hit. So it's been a tricky situation, third base. So they have a bunch of holes in the lineup right now that need fixing. So, possible replacement options. You have Chaim Bloom, and he's worked with the Tampa Bay Rays, who have perpetually had strong farm systems and guys who are always coming up. He worked with the Boston Red Sox and helped build those teams into championship caliber teams, including the 2018 Boston Red Sox that won the World Series. So he would be the strongest out of the four candidates that I'm going to present here, because he has the biggest track record of success. So that's a candidate that would be worthy of looking into. You have David Frost, who has been Oakland's GM since 2015. He's brought the Oakland A's into the playoffs 5 times. He has actually won at least one playoff series, which Shapiro and Atkins have failed to do. And in spectacular fashion, via the pulling of Jose Barrios in favor of Yusei Kikuchi and blowing that game sky high. Blunder at his best, because that came from Shapiro and came from Atkins. That did not come from John Snyder, no matter what they tell you. So, David Frost, Oakland's GM, has the least amount of payroll in the league to work with, and has still won more playoff series than the Blue Jays. So, just imagine what he could do with the proper personnel and $200 million. Hopefully he doesn't go crazy and spend that in an ill fashion, but odds are he could do a lot with the added flexibility, as it were. You have Derek Falvey, who is in the Twins organization, Minnesota. They broke an 18-year playoff losing streak last year by sweeping who? Oh yeah, the Blue Jays. And he was the president of baseball operations that built that team to be able to beat us in the playoffs last year. And they have the number 8 farm system in 2024 in all of Major League Baseball. I don't have the number in front of me, but I could imagine that ours is bottom 3rd. So then you have an enigma, as it were. Now, 2 of these names were kind of like uh-oh names to me, because they were David Frost from Oakland, and I'm like, ugh, Oakland, that's not a good look. And the other one was a former GM of the Miami Marlins, and that's like the Eastern version of the Oakland Athletics, which is Kim NG. And she took a $96 million payroll to the 2023 playoffs And they won that series with a track record of smart trades, because she traded Arias and developed Alcantara, who was the 2022 Cy Young Award winner. So she even has a better track record in the last 9 years than Shapiro and Atkins. Now, you could even take 2 people off of this list, put one as your president, so a Falvey, and a Bloom as your GM, or vice versa. Or you could take a Bloom as your president, NG as your GM, anything like that. Mix and match, whoever you want to do. But these are potential solutions to the problem that we present. So, we come back to the original question. To blow it up or not to blow it up? Do we stay the course, or do we make a difficult but necessary change? And you can't always change the players or the coaching and get different results. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes you have to start at the very pinnacle of your organization and work down. Work top down, because sometimes the real issue are the 2 guys at the top, because they are the common denominator. How many players have come and gone since 2016? And who is still here? What's the common denominator? And in this case, that common denominator is Mark Shapiro and Ross Atkins. And if Mark Shapiro is not willing to make a change at the top level and in his scouting and personnel departments, and really bring in people who can do a better job of developing players and constantly having a feed system through the farm system, because that's what it's meant to be, in the way that Alex Anthopoulos and Paul Beeston built it up, then Mark Shapiro needs to go. And with him, Ross Atkins, because those 2 guys working together have done nothing but bring heartache, an expensive rebuild of a stadium when they should have just knocked it down and rebuilt it all together. And what do we have to show for it? Heartache in the wild card? Like, that's not acceptable for a Canadian team. So, closing thoughts. We need change in Toronto in the baseball scene. It needs to start at the top and not with the players or the coaching at the bottom. It needs to be built up again over time. Fans need to understand once the change is made, it'll take a couple of years. And sadly, we're wasting years of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to do this, but it needs to happen. Because if you look down the farm system, how are you going to trade for players when you don't have the assets in place to make those trades? So, let's rebuild it, let's knock it down, and let's turn this thing around and get us a winner back here in Canada. Alright guys, that's our episode for today, True North Sports Talk. Hopefully you found us either on YouTube, Rumble, or Spotify. You can find us in any one of those places. Make sure you subscribe to our channels so that we can continue to bring you content. You'll always get updates and notifications as to when we're dropping new episodes. Make sure you check out our daily 3-minute drill and any other content that we're dropping. And we will see you guys for the next episode of True North Sports Talk.